go with nay, but first, before I address the nay, how did you get to work today? Did you crawl?
Welcome back to On Deadline, the Washington Examiner's political game show. I'm Christian Daytalk.
And I'm Tiana Low-Desher.
Each episode, we bring you the biggest news from the last week in politics, deliver our takes, and then at the end, you get to vote on which one of us was more right than the other one. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with your friends. Like we do every week, we're starting Above the Fold. It's a 1-minute segment where we make the case for the top news in politics. Tiana, what's on your mind this week?
The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was created in 2010 as a part of Dodd-Frank, and after a decade and a half, this constitutional abomination is finally likely at an end. President Trump's OMB director, Russ Vought, has instructed the agency to stand down. All the Bureau's members are notably exempt from the return to office order. And why? Because the president has the power to defund it. Unlike other executive agencies, the Bureau here is not actually funded by Congress. As a part of its original design from Dodd-Frank, it gets its money from the Federal Reserve, which theoretically is another independent agency. This means that it's not only not subject to presidential oversight by design, it's also not subject to the power of the purse. The only way to fix the Bureau is by ending it. If Congress wants to delegate its powers to another agency, it can decide to fund it.
Tiana, this is an issue that we've seen play out in real time as Donald Trump and DOJ target certain federal agencies. But my question to you is, CFPB was stood up with a very real goal in mind. Keep Americans, protected from predatory credit card practices, and then eventually, if they get into debt, payday lenders or, cash for scam personal loans in the mail. So while they might be doing the right thing in terms of shrinking the federal bureaucracy, closing a loophole that allowed this agency to operate in the first place, who's going to be looking out for everyday Americans?
So remember that these jobs, historically, the federal government, it does have regulatory oversight already. Mm-hmm. You have the Federal Reserve that is in charge of auditing banks, and that's why you're not supposed to have bank failures. SEC is looking at trades. You have the rest of the Treasury. You have multiple departments that already have these tools. What defines predatory? That's an open debate, and it's one that, things that we disagree with. I've written heavily against the credit card interest rate cap bill by Josh Hawley and Bernie Sanders. That would just deprive the working class access to lines of credit. However, that is Congress doing its job, right? If they want to define what predatory lending is, they can do it. One of the issues with CFPB is that it totally it devolved into a partisan instrument, and again, it's pretty much part of the design, right? Because it was completely independent from presidential oversight and congressional funding, its focus became making news, just trying to crack down, especially in the last, under Biden, we saw it really just try and punish Google for Google payment products and whatnot. Not doing the job it set out to do, but really it just comes down to the structure. If Congress wants to pass something, they can do it. And better yet, when Congress does pass something, this is why Trump is trying to relitigate the Impoundment Act in the Supreme Court. It might be a losing battle. It probably is a losing battle. And even if he tried to do it, there would be an immediate injunction freezing his ability to do so. Christian, what are you looking at this week?
Well, for the last 2 years, Donald Trump has been telling us that as soon as he gets into office, prices will immediately drop. Turns out that was either wishful thinking or a lie that the American public took hook, line, and sinker. We're now 4 weeks into Trump's second term, and he seems much more focused on banning DEI, pulling Joe Biden's presidential security clearance, even dunking on Taylor Swift at the Super Bowl, than he is to combat skyrocketing egg prices and the coming effects that his tariff agenda will have on the housing industry, transportation, electronics. All of these things are going to be compounding in a bad way for American consumers. And I've got some numbers to show. 66% of Americans believe that Donald Trump is not doing enough to address rising prices. That includes 50% of Republicans. Consumer sentiment has reached a 7-month low. And the USDA, that's Trump's own administration, saying that food prices are going to jump by 1% to 2% over the next year. Look, this is an issue that is not going away. Donald Trump needs to focus on the one thing he promised he would address on the campaign trail, or his honeymoon period is going to be over before you can say Wizard of Oz, man behind the curtain, I guess.
I can quibble with some small details, right? With the egg prices, the reason why we're having this crisis is it's H5N1 bird flu.
Yeah.
And that was a consequence of Biden administration policy, right? Other countries like France instituted a vaccination program because unlike with COVID, you didn't need to reinvent the wheel. The stockpile of vaccines we had for another avian flu from during the Obama administration was shown to be, in CDC testing, extremely effective against this strain. So you didn't need to create a new vaccine. All you had to do was vaccinate the existing bird fleet. Biden decided not to do it because he didn't want to jeopardize agricultural trade relationships. What would be nice is to see Trump reverse course, and if you're going to use the tariffs to do anything, push them to say, hey, guess what? You're going to accept vaccinated birds or risk a 25% tariff imposed on you. But broadly speaking, yes, Christian, I wish that there was more attention paid to the inflation issue, but for different reasons. I'm looking at the tax bill debate, and we know we need TCJA extension because absent extending TCJA, that's a tax hike on 62% of Americans, and on top of that, you don't want to complexify the tax code. You do want to make it simple. You want most people taking the standard deduction. However, the measures that Trump is adding to that bill actually are inflationary, right? Tariffs, as we've discussed, the risk is less that they're inflationary and more that they cap economic growth.
Sure.
Social Security exemption for taxes, income tax, tax on tips exemption, those are inflationary, and they also increase that deficit issue where you actually have to pay for this bill if you want to pass it in reconciliation. You're turning a $2.2 trillion bill into like a $5 trillion bill. And that not only makes the political calculus more difficult, but also makes mitigating inflation much harder.
I'm glad you brought all of those numbers because again, I look at this from a reporter standpoint, not necessarily from an economist standpoint. Trump's doing the same exact messaging, his messaging strategy is, illustrative of the same failings that sort of sank Joe Biden's term in office. Joe Biden was talking about, we did all this stuff to the economy and you're gonna feel the effects down the line. But when it came down to it, 3 years into his presidency, and people weren't feeling the effects of what these green energy tax credits were supposed to bring, or feeling the effects of pouring investment capital into infrastructure projects across the country, Donald Trump is now saying, well, it's going to work itself out down the line, but the American people want immediacy. And I think this is a problem when it comes to discussing politics versus policy. It is impossible to lower prices with the snap of your finger. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat, and I think it's time for elected, leaders in office to start being honest with the American people. Just stop running on lies on the campaign trail, guys. It shouldn't be that hard. Otherwise, you're going to put your own party in a worse position than when they were when you entered office.
Time for yays and nays, where we give our opinion on the news of the week. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree.
Trump's return to office order for federal workers will be short-lived.
I think this is pretty easy, and we're seeing it play out in real time. Just, a little sauce behind the camera. We're recording this on Monday. It was the first day that federal workers were required to be back in the office pursuant to Donald Trump's return to work order. What that means in layman's terms is that my normal 20-minute commute from Northwest DC to downtown took about an hour and 20 minutes. And we do know that what DOGE is doing, they're trying to sort of cram all of these federal workers into space which has shrunk since COVID, and they're making their lives miserable so that they will quit. Now, on the flip side of this, you've got all these injunctions by judges across the country trying to stay Donald Trump's orders, whether it's RTO or DOGE getting into Treasury. And I think this is going to be an easy one that blows up in their face. There are Republicans who work in the federal government who had telework agreements, who have taken jobs since COVID where they never had to show up in the office. They're not going to want to stay and deal with this nonsense, even if, Elon Musk is trying to run the federal government like the way he ran Twitter, make people sleep in sleeping bags on the work floor, and they'll say, hey, they up and quit their jobs. That's a win for us because the bottom line and payroll is lower than when we took office. This just seems, overbearing and punitive, and I don't think it's something that the Trump administration will want to spend the political capital on, especially when they've got all these other high-pressing issues to deal with.
Okay, I have to go with nay, but first, before I address the nay, how did you get to work today? Did you crawl? Did you bike?
It probably would have been faster. No, I took my usual route. It's about 3 turns from my house to our garage parking office.
That's what everyone said not to drive in D.C. because there literally aren't enough parking spaces.
Oh.
Which gets to why I'm saying nay. Nay, because there is a long-term goal at hand. Already, 65,000 federal workers agreed to take the buyout, where the deadline was February 6th, and the Trump administration said, if you give us your resignation, you will get paid for the next 8 months, and you do not need to do anything. You don't need to show up to work. You can go on vacation. It is the sabbatical that Americans dream of, right? And of course, this means that the left-wing unions are trying to fight it in court, saying it's illegal, when actually it's the best payday. It almost makes me mad as a fiscal conservative, but you know what? It's a great way of getting rid of workers that shouldn't be there.
Take that trip to Scotland you've always wanted to take.
Right? So the federal workers, yes, this has, in short, not been handled extremely efficiently because you do have these situations where people don't have enough office space. They're really scrambling to figure it out. Charles Allen, one of the city council members, said, don't drive to work because it's going to be a nightmare, and more importantly, parking. We're down 20,000 parking spots based on the demand. So they were telling everyone, take the metro. If you can't take the metro, take the bus. Which is, I took the bus instead of the metro because I actually wanted to be able to sit, and that was a good call. But the long-term strategy, we know in the private sector that remote work and hybrid work are extremely efficient choices for the private companies that can do them.
Yeah.
And so where you have close to 50% of workers working remotely, it's finance, insurance, tech support, computer systems. Higher skilled jobs where the deliverables are pretty obvious. So a worker knows, let's take a company, Airbnb, that is 100% remote. I don't even think they have a headquarters at this point. They can just fire you if you aren't delivering on your job because they can see it. Federal work is very different. And not only is it very different, and you have a lot of lower level, mid-level employees, but also it's extremely hard to fire a federal worker. You have to give a 30-day notice with a reason, and the worker has the right to appeal to an outside agency, complain to an outside agency, and if you win, you get reinstated with full back pay and benefits. Point being, if you want to have private sector cushions and private sector accommodations like hybrid, which we know increases the fertility rate. It's pretty much the only outside intervention that's done so, which we know workers will take in lieu of a raise. That's a smart thing for a private industry to choose to uphold. If you want those accommodations, then you have to play by the same rules in terms of hiring and firing. So I would imagine that after the initial resignations you get from the people that shouldn't be there, more senior employees, and especially ones who aren't team-based, and especially those that had pre-existing hybrid or remote accommodations before COVID, that there will be a pretty imminent relaxation of the return to office orders for them. But you know what, for a generation of 20-somethings that have only known working over Zoom and Teams, I'd be surprised if they want to go back to the full-time remote thing.
I agree.
Hybrid in the long run, I think, is really beneficial for especially parents, all of that, dealing with more flexibility. But assumption of being in office as a baseline, it's a good thing, and there's a reason why you don't hear DC city government complaining about it, because they just posted their highest metro ridership since 2020.
All right, up next, it's time for us to fill in the blank.
The House Democrats' new impeachment effort against Donald Trump indicates blank.
I rise to announce that I will bring articles of impeachment against the president for dastardly deeds proposed and dastardly deeds done.
They're so cooked.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you in spirit. I'm going to disagree a little bit in terms of the actual word. I'm going to say they haven't learned anything at all. But, the sentiment is the same, right? we're using the same old tired playbook to try and attack a guy in a way that didn't even work in the first place 2 times over during the first term in office, including one time after he surmounted an insurrection on the Capitol. So maybe we go back to the well, guys. But let's look at who filed these articles of impeachment, right? Al Green, Texas Democrat. I don't want to be mean, but maybe one of the dumbest people I've ever met in my entire life. He didn't actually cite any specific actions that Trump did. He just said it was for like nefarious acts and nefarious things that he's talking about doing. Like, who is running the Democratic Party right now?
I think it's probably the most pressing question in Washington because there actually is no answer. If resistance liberalism as like it's hard to think of a bigger failure of a political faction.
Yeah.
At least like the DSA, Dem socialists, they've gotten a lot what they've wanted in pushing the party to the left. The issue for them is that the party apparatus itself is totally leaderless and rudderless. Like, it's, I guess, kind of Nancy Pelosi, but, okay, so she succeeded in getting Joe Biden off the ballot. And since then, nothing. You don't have anything. And I think people, like, in hindsight, like, Kamala Harris will probably benefit from hindsight of this era because they'll see, like, yeah, she wasn't a great politician. She wasn't a great campaigner. But, like, a lot of the structural problems there were not her fault.
I agree.
They weren't even specific to Joe Biden, the person, so much as Joe Biden, the political legacy of just Democrats have nothing to run on. Even the forms of resistance have been incredibly futile. Like, I think I've seen more nuanced conservative criticism over some of Trump's strategy, so to speak, than actually. Democrats are screaming into the void, screaming into the echo chamber, and like, just look at the confirmation battle. Mm-hmm. They could have chosen one. They could have chosen one person to go all in on blocking. I've made clear I would have gone all in on blocking RFK Jr. because like that is someone that will be responsible for 1 out of every $4 spent by the federal government. Mm-hmm. And instead, they had nothing. You know, they decided to go all in on the Kavanaugh playbook against Pete Hegseth, and that failed. And then they went with Tulsi Gabbard as a Russian stooge, something January 6 Kash Patel, and Trump is slated to get his entire cabinet. In fact, if you don't count Matt Gaetz backing out after the initial announcement that he would be Attorney General, Trump is slated to become the first president to get all of his cabinet picks in a second term, or because technically this is a discrete presidency from his first term. To enter a term getting all of his picks since, I believe, Ronald Reagan? Like, and not with a big Senate margin.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. I mean, I feel like I opened up the show today talking about how Donald Trump is doing a whole lot of things over here to distract you from what he isn't doing, right? And that's almost exactly what Democrats like Chuck Schumer or Maxine Waters are doing. They want their voters back home to say, oh, I'm here. But they not really are asking questions about what are you actually doing about these problems, right? It's emblematic of a problem in politics writ large. It certainly reared its head for Democrats on the 2024 campaign trail. It seems like they haven't learned those lessons yet. And I'm worried that no one is going to step up, whether it's Ken Martin or David Hogg, the new leadership over at the DNC. I don't have high hopes for them, but maybe it needs to be someone like, again, and we've talked about her on this show, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She has the bona fides. She is young and can connect with this next generation of voters.
She showed better political instincts than half the Democrats in 2024.
100%. It just needs to be somebody, because I don't think we can afford to wait around for 4 years and do some of this old men screaming at clouds type of resistance anymore. We're finishing up today with our last laugh, a segment where we look at the lighter side of politics. Tiana, what tickled your fancy over the weekend?
So I'm glad to know that President Trump, like all of us, got pretty bored pretty quickly at the Super Bowl, right? That was an unfortunate failure by the Chiefs in terms of the speed of it, because it wasn't incredibly entertaining football. So he decides to, do you say truth out? Because I guess
let's
you don't
just
tweet
say
out.
tweet.
Yeah.
Come
so
on,
he
potatoes,
tweets out
potatoes.
on Truth Social that he wants to ban the penny. I think the penny, it's 3 times more expensive to make than the actual value of the penny, and obviously in this economy, is anything measured down to the penny?
And it's not just the penny that Donald Trump is taking aim at. He is, Gonna ban paper straws
I'd
somehow?
like to see you try and defend paper straws, Christian.
Oh, no, I will not. I've talked to many environmentalists, ecologists who say not only do paper straws not actually help sea turtles, they're just annoying to use, right? And people throw them on the ground because you're walking with your coffee. You don't get to the litter bin. It's a huge loss. Anyway, good for Trump for doing that. But he also, flying down to New Orleans, decided to take a break and hold a press conference.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you could please direct your attention out the right side of the aircraft. Air Force One is currently in international waters, for the first time in history, flying over the recently renamed Gulf of America.
With this proclamation to call today Gulf of America Day.
It's not Valentine's Day yet, but it's Gulf of America Day, so it's coming soon. So make sure you go pick up your flowers.
There you go.
And place your jewelry order.
Yeah,
That is,
it's a memory thing.
yeah. You know, I at least there was an idea there. Patriotism. We don't like Mexico or something. One group that doesn't have a coherent message.
Oh, yeah.
Democrats that are literally screaming at clouds, as you said, but
yeah.
like that wasn't a figure of speech. Take a listen.
We will win! We will win! We will win! We will win!
Christian, what is the combined age of this stage? And does Chuck Schumer need to be sent to a retirement home?
Well, one, it's very rude to ask a woman her age, so I never will ask Maxine Waters how old she is. But Chuck Schumer, like, you're from New York. They have wonderful theater programs up there. Let's get this guy some work when it comes to, controlling a stage and being, like, energetic and inspiring. I mean, that was just pathetic, my man. Come on.
And again, what's the message? Like, I don't understand. This is the genius of Trump. And I think it's very intentional. He chooses targets that he knows are very difficult or politically inexpedient to defend.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you really want to defend paper straws and the penny and USAID? And it's something he's gotten much better at. It's smart politics to go after USAID and tell a bunch of six-figure salaried federal workers you're going back into the office. And just to watch Democrats do the same thing for 8 years in a row now, calling him literally Hitler, threat to democracy, fascist, insert pejorative here.
I feel like we've seen this movie before.
And
Anyway,
it doesn't end well.
Anyway, that's all the time we've got for this week. Let us know in the comments who you think won this week's clash. And don't forget to subscribe to make sure you get an episode as soon as it pops right in your notifications. In the meantime, you can check out more of our great reporting at washingtonexaminer.com. I'm Christian Daytalk.
I'm Tiana Lowe Dasher.
And we'll see you next time.